Hey everyone, how's it going?
Doing well. Welcome to a weekly MA.
Yup, hey Ogle.
Hello. A little bit of a packed house today, it looks like.
That's good.
Snapshot, where in the world are you right now?
I am in Georgia, the country, not the state.
Nice. Is it wild and fun there right now?
Lots of big protests, so that's why I'm here.
Very good.
What about you, Ogo? Where are you in the world?
An undisclosed location in North America. Soon to be in Texas though, for the conference, and then today I bought these ringside tickets to the Mike Tyson and Jake Paul fight, so I'll be back in Texas again in July. I do have an extra ticket for that, so I was trying to figure out what I should do with that.
Yeah, try to convince me to come to Texas in July. That was a nice try.
Didn't work out. So maybe what can happen is Snapshot, since he refuses to come, could just sponsor someone else coming in his stead. I don't know.
Sounds like a terrible plan to me. All right, should we kick it off, Bell?
Sounds great. Yeah, we start with the first question from the community. Just reminding everyone, if you have a question, just raise your hand and we will allow you to speak. Our first question is, many technically good projects have failed due to poor marketing. How do you plan to balance strong technology with effective marketing, including working with key opinion leaders?
Ogle, I think that's a you question.
There we go. Yes, it is. So basically, how do we get like KOLs to work with us? Is that essentially the point here, Bill? Without it being a bunch of scams or something?
Yeah, yes, the difference, because there are some projects that we see that they have different goals with, well, let's say reputation less than the best. So we would like to find out from you what is the take on marketing for Glue, and if you can, give us some alphas of some of our marketing.
Yeah, Ogle, sure. I think part of the question was to like, do we have a strong marketing program, right? I think the question was partially aimed at some projects have really strong tech, but really shit marketing, and that's not great.
I see.
And so I think Bell's part, but I think that was the other part of the question, at least as I took it. So, I mean, also yes. That's a reasonable question, so we might as well do both.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so in general, that is the case. Either you have like what you might call like left brain, people on the team, or right brain people, like say like tech nerds, or you have like marketing scammers, and it kind of just goes one of those routes. And in crypto, kind of either one of those work sometimes, and also neither one of those fully work sometimes. So if you look at like the very best projects that have the very best outcomes, generally there's like a mixture of that, right? So you have like good tech, good, like fundamentals, blah, 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 blah. But you also have people who know how to get the word out there and make people aware of that and convince folks to care, basically. In our case, I think that we definitely have both of those. And, we've talked before about the background of myself and Snapshot. Both of us have built technology companies. Both of us have built advertising and marketing related companies as well. And Snapshot still has quite a large one as is, whereas I do not. And so I think that we definitely have the chops on both those sides, but just specifically speaking about Glue, the marketing team that works with us, so we have, if you consider like everyone who's touching marketing in a meaningful way, that is to say like spending over half of their working time focusing on marketing at Glue, we have 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, 10, I think either 10 or 11 people total that are doing that as a focus. And we in fact have another third party we're working with right now that has 4 more people inside of it that we've been talking to for the past few days. And so that will be 15 people total who are in some way or another spending at least half of their time working on marketing related activities. Now, does that mean that we have begun the marketing push? No, of course not. I think anyone can see that's not the case. But we certainly have it there. It's the key with us, I think, and I think the key with like how to build a project or a company with integrity, when you include marketing, because like the idea behind marketing essentially is to ostensibly the idea is to educate people, but really what the idea is to convince people, right? And so you don't want to convince people in a way that is short term. So like you don't want to say, hey, come here and get a free iPod, and then they click on it and actually it's a scam, it's not really there. So you got their attention, but you didn't get their attention for like a long time, and you didn't get their attention ethically, right? So first off, you don't want to have people who come in short term, and secondly, you want people to come in a way that is in line with like sort of the values that you yourself hold. And so we could go out there and sort of just shill, but it's not what I want to do. We could go out there and do loads and loads of just giveaways of free cash. But again, that's like free iPod kind of thing. You get people to look at you for a few minutes and then they walk away and leave. And so we're trying to be very conscientious about how it is we're doing this marketing and how we're going to go forward. And I think that I think we're almost there. We're not quite there. I spent 12 hours or more yesterday critiquing virtually everybody on little small nitpick things that I have opinions about for how we're doing this. But once it comes together fully and we're actually deployed, so to speak, or in marketing terms, once we're activated, then I think it's going to be pretty solid. We do have the connections to the publications. We do have the connections to KOLs. We do have the connections to big projects. We do have the connection to traditional media. And so we have everything there. We just want to make sure it's right. And so that has taken a little bit of time to get moving. But once it does, crossing fingers, with everyone's help in here and everyone's help that's in the community, we should be in a good spot.
Yeah, and just adding business-wise, right? So I think one thing that's kind of key to understand is we've been working on the tech for close to 3 years now, right? So we had a long time to make a lot of progress, albeit kind of slower because we're building the bear market, right? But we had a lot of time to do things. Where with the marketing side, that's not the case, right? We couldn't really warm up marketing 2 years ago because it would have all been stale and useless. And so really those efforts kind of got kickstarted right before the LBP, I'd say, right? That's when we really started aggressively working on it.
Yeah.
We went from, I guess, one person on the marketing side to 11, right? So the hiring took some time. And so just to understand business-wise, it's a large project. There's a ton of content that's gotten written. We're making super good progress, and I'm super happy to see how much progress we're making so quickly. But yeah, I would say that's the big difference from the tech perspective, right? That's why I've been talking about tech for the last 3 months, is because I've had 3 years to get going, where Ogle, who's leading the marketing side, has had more like 2 months, right? So it's just a very different time frame on which we're working, which obviously makes it much more challenging to have prepared, because you really can't prepare per se. So that's why things are in the coming together stage versus in the we've been working on this for a long time stage, I'd say.
Yeah, good point.
Wow, thanks for the transparency and sharing with us the information. I have a next question here. It's about marketing as well, somewhat, and mostly for you, Ogo. You'll be speaking at the consensus on the end of the month. And the question is whether you'll be talking about glue or about safety in crypto during the consensus. And also, there's another question. Will there be a glue stand at the conference or something similar?
So for the last question, no, there won't be. We actually emailed Consensus kind of last minute. It was about a week and a half ago. We emailed them and said, hey, we'd like to know what the sponsorship opportunities are like, because we were thinking of just sponsoring an entire stage, actually. There are 2 stages right now that do not have sponsors, and one of them is like the second biggest stage. And so I was thinking, that'd be actually kind of a cool thing. Let's go try and sponsor that whole stage and really kind of kick it off really well. But we haven't heard back from them, strangely. I believe Ponyo has followed up and still hasn't heard back. So, I guess that's not going to happen, unfortunately. But there are a number of other conferences that we're going to be going to. I'll be speaking as well at Token 2049 in Singapore. And so we have a lot of heads up to be able to sort some stuff out for that one. And there are a number of little smaller conferences in between there that more than likely we'll have some kind of presence. Whether we'll have a booth, I would say the chances maybe 25% yes, 75% no. They generally are like the ROI on booths has not been good in my experience. Perhaps Snapshot, you've had different ones with your companies, but in my experience, the ROI has not really been there. So probably we won't unless there's like a good reason to. Once everything's deployed, like mainnet's deployed, maybe we'll do some stuff, for like POAPs or something in that case, but probably not before mainnet is out and we actually are kind of like moving along. Just really quickly before I answer the first question there, Bell, I just want to talk about marketing in general for a second. So one thing that's important to understand with marketing is there's two basic types of marketing in the world that you see. You have what's called brand marketing, which is like, you have like a Coke on a billboard somewhere, and it just makes you think of that brand. And so the whole point there is to kind of embed itself, its colors, its logo into your head, so that when you go to the store and you see red and black and a certain shape, you think, oh, I've seen that all around, and I'm going to buy that drink because I've been seeing it everywhere. It's sort of like brainwashing in a certain sense, which is, that's just what brand marketing is. The difficulty with brand marketing is you can't really tie that back to every dollar you spend, how much dollars do you get back in return, right? And so that's a somewhat complicated way of marketing. The other way of marketing is called performance advertising. And there's other ways of phrasing it as well, but mostly it's called performance advertising. And what that means basically is you put an ad, for example, you spend $100 on ads and people have what's called a call to action. And you can base your results on whether or not you get the call to action that you want. So the call to action might be a purchase. It might be clicking on a website. It might be signing up for an email list. It might be, in our case, like adding liquidity, whatever. And so we're going to focus a greater amount of advertising dollars, unless something changes, we'll be focusing a greater amount of advertising dollars on performance marketing in the future, more than likely. And so, yes, of course, we want our name out there, something like, a banner at Consensus or wherever else, like sponsoring a stage. These things are good for just getting the word out to, that you exist, but they're not necessarily good for actually like returns and actually getting users and so forth. And so, so I just want to be clear that we're thinking about the two different ways of doing that. And almost certainly we're going to focus on performance advertising mostly. And so the first question you asked though was about the way of like what the speech is going to be about or what the talk is going to be about. So basically, the talk is going to be around security, basically like negotiating or getting money back from crypto hacks. Like that's the point. It's that crypto hack recovery focused talk. Most of the time when I speak, it's around that sort of thing. And so it's a way to, I guess, in a sense, like subtly be able to talk about Glue and how we, basically in some ways, I'm hoping that with Glue, I would be able to like retire from having to do that, right? And so that's going to be a big part of kind of the focus. If I'm able to sort of spin it up the right way I want to, I'll talk about the general things. I'll talk about some stories and some interesting things to get people engaged with what it is that I've done, some of the fun stories of recovering money and so forth. But then talk about how like this fun might be short-lived because it may be the case that soon, especially with something like Glue, we don't really have to worry about that quite as much. Right, so that's kind of how I'm planning on tying that in.
Thanks. Well, you'll be there as well, and you'll be having lots of contacts and talking to people about Glue when you're not speaking. So that's great as well.
Oh yeah, and actually, Panya was working on some swag right now, and some of it looks pretty cool. Like, so there, it might be the case that I have like a cool jacket or a cool shirt that I wear that should get some attention, and we may have some other stuff to give out to people if there happen to be some folks from the Glue community there at the conference. And of course, we're going to have a dinner. We're setting up a dinner. So we're going to be marketing there, but we're not necessarily going to have a booth, and I'm glad for that because I really don't want to spend 12 hours a day standing around a booth with people who don't really care.
Sounds great. Thanks. 3 more questions from the community, and I'll go to the next one. How does Glue's tokenomics strategy using runtime upgrades differ from the traditional DAO model? And what benefits does this offer for the community involvement?
So maybe let me quickly dive into the tech aspect of runtime upgrades. So when Ethereum does an upgrade, what effectively happens is that a new piece of software gets shipped to all the validators, right? And the validators then use that new piece of software, which is called doing a hard fork, which means everyone just switches to what is effectively a new chain. Now, the problem with that is that, for example, Tether ends up having a pretty massive amount of power in that scenario, because if Tether said, well, we don't really care what you guys do, we're going to keep backing this old chain, right? All the collateral stays with the old chain. Ethereum has a problem, right? So the hard forks are a pretty suboptimal solution, I would say, in general. Now, both Substrate / Polkadot, Tezos has a solution to this as well. So what the other option is it's called a runtime upgrade, which means that instead of saying, hey, validators, just switch to the new thing if you want to adopt the software, which obviously also gives the validators a lot of power, not really the token holders, right? If you're an Ethereum holder, you don't get to vote if you want to switch to a new fork, right? It's definitely not if you're not also staking, but if you're staking, I guess somewhat, but still whoever's running your software is most likely to actually have a lot more power than you do as the staker. How it works with Polkadot, again, Tezos has a similar system there as well, is that you can effectively upload the new code into the old code. So you basically upload the change to the L1 that you want to make to the L1, right? And this sounds a bit recursive, and I think my explanation isn't excellent, but it's kind of complicated. So you upload the code, and then everyone with tokens can vote on if that code should be promoted. So effectively, it's a decentralized way to figure out, should we adopt this new piece of code that doesn't rely on just the validator switching? Because what happens if the vote passes is that automatically the code updates, right? The old code will no longer be valid. And so validators don't have, they don't really have a choice to not go with it. And what that means is that there's no hard fork, right? There's no old version and the new version. There's simply one chain. And so what that does mean, for example, that if somebody wants to submit a proposal that whatever I hate, that Ogle hates, right, whatever it is, and it passes, like we cannot do anything about it, right? It passes, it gets promoted. There's no background. Oh, who needs to convince which validators to actually adopt it, right? So it gets done by the network itself. Now, the difference to DAOs is, right, generally speaking, in most DAO structures, that doesn't really happen either, right? There's a DAO, and then there's a vote, and then generally speaking, there's a manager who actually has to adopt the vote. And so it is a very meaningful difference, because what this allows us to do is that funds can live on chain and they can be distributed via a runtime upgrade, versus just putting it into a foundation and saying, oh, well, the foundation board can kind of do whatever they want, right? So having runtime upgrades is a pretty huge benefit. I basically, it does what you would like DAOs to do that DAOs not always do, right? It enforces the mechanism a lot more thoroughly than DAOs do. And there's some DAOs that are really well written. Generally, when they're really well written, they're much more narrow of scope, though. The runtime upgrades really allow the code of the network itself to be upgraded via a vote. And there's no like backdoors, et cetera, where anyone else can kind of block that. So that was a bit of a long-winded technical answer. I think we have a piece of content that we're working on. It's still a little bit out, so it's not going to be imminent. But I really think getting people more familiar with this is going to be, I think, like it is truly excellent. It's like one of my favorite features of both Glue and Substrate. So I really want to put a lot more attention to it. I think most people don't realize how excellent the Substrate tech is. This being one of the cornerstones of it. So we're gonna spend a lot of time on digging more into these. Bell, did that answer actually the question that you asked?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay,
for sure, we revisit this topic again, because it's not something that a lot of people are acquainted with. But thank you, I appreciate it.
Hey.
We have a couple people that have raised their hands. So we had both Action and Hannah.
Hey, yes, thank you. I I wanted to ask a question about marketing before we go into another topic. You mentioned that you are going to work mostly like on performance marketing, right? And my experience that there should be like main channels that you are going to cover. So I'm a bit curious, like what channels they're gonna be. Is it gonna be mostly like, I don't know, PPC, SEO? Are you gonna guys work I don't know, on paid socials? So that would help. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, good question, Hannah. So what a channel is for anyone who doesn't know is essentially like what, like how and what place are you going to be buying something. So like as she had mentioned, there was a PPC, which means pay per click. So there's SEO, which is search engine optimization. There's social channels. So for example, you could advertise on paid ads on like Facebook or TikTok or whatever. And so the answer is we're probably just going to test all of them. Like I said, both Snapshot and I have extensive, like very extensive experience with paid ads. Snapshot, won Forbes 30 under 30 in the marketing category for his advertising technology business a few years ago. Combined, he and I have spent, let's see, you spent what, 260 million, give or take. Snapshot, and I've spent probably about $100 million worth of ads over the course of the past decade. So, we've done lots of paid ads, and almost all of that on performance basis, like for like user acquisition related things. And so, the answer is, Anna, if you're advertising one product, let's say it's like sodas or whatever, and the demography for that is whatever it is, and the geo for that is whatever it is, a certain channel is going to work for that might not work for, plants, right? Or it might not work for a blockchain company. Now, the fact is there's not a lot of performance advertising that's really been done in the blockchain space. And there's two reasons for that. One, most of the people who come into to create new companies in crypto don't have experience with doing it, so they don't even know what it is. The only way they know how to get new people is to ask their friends to post about it on Twitter, right? Things like that, or to get a VC to back them, and then whatever they do. And the second reason is because for a long time, crypto ads were banned on most of the platforms. And so I know back in 2016, 17, I was trying to help out a crypto company do some ads, and we just kept on getting screwed because we couldn't say almost anything that related to crypto. Now the case is a little bit different. You still can't do certain things with these ads, but you can do them. And so, yeah, so I'm not really sure exactly what channel is going to work for us, but we're going to try virtually everything. And we'll just track it and see what works. It also depends on what our goal is. So we might have direct response ads that are focused on user acquisition to the chain itself. And then we might have user acquisition that's, direct response ads that are focused more on pulling people from a competitor, right? And those that would probably work better with SEO, because if you can target a competitor's keywords, then you're going to be able to get to that competitor's users, right? So it's really, really, really granular how we'll go about that and how it's going to work. But we'll see. We'll probably waste a good bit of money in the beginning trying to figure out what the answer is there. That's generally what they call buying data, right? And so we'll probably buy a bunch of data, and whenever we find something that works, we will just push it all the way. And it doesn't mean we won't have brand advertising. I mean, we're going to have a lot of that too. We have to, I think, if we're going to compete with some of the bigger folks. But I think brand advertising style of stuff is going to come a little bit later, more than likely. And in the beginning, we just need to get people to come and try the thing. I will say one more thing. An interesting version of like performance-focused marketing that's being used in crypto these days is, and I don't think these companies even realize what they're doing, but basically you have like incentive marketing, which is a whole subsection of performance marketing. People are doing incentive marketing by using these point systems and like referral systems. So like referral systems is like affiliate marketing, right? So you get paid if you bring other people in. And so this is like taking some of the old concepts, and new companies like Blast and Manta and I think EtherFi did it, and several others, where if you bring liquidity to them or you stake stuff with them or whatever, and if you refer friends to do the same, then you get paid a little bit of a bonus as well. And so, more than likely, we're going to implement some of those sorts of things as well. We definitely have some plans in place that hopefully we can release over the next, not long. This is definitely in the dev team's court. but hopefully we can release some of those things here in the next very soon. And I can use this as a call to action for people who are at consensus. So that way I can see, does it actually work? Can I talk to someone and say, hey, go over here and go to this website and deposit $100? And if you do that, then we're going to take care of you in whatever way. Hopefully we can have something ready. But if we can't, that's okay. We'll do it 2 weeks later or a month later, and we'll do it in a different way. Does that answer your question, Hannah?
Yes, this is perfect. I definitely have lots of comments, so I'm not gonna make wait long because I'm pretty sure there are many other people who want to ask the question. But also related a bit to that topic as well, you mentioned that there should be like a clear call to action. And since right now, when I'm like looking at your website, right, you're still building all this, marketing acquisition channel. There is at the moment, I see that there is like no clear CTA for the users. So let's say if you're gonna start attracting visitors, whether it's from organic or from paid socials, do you plan on driving more like to the investors target audience, where like, hey, join us for a pre-sale, blah blah blah, it's just for the sake of the example, or sign up or go to our communities or talk to us? So what would be the main like call to action at this stage of the company development? I think that's very interesting part. Thank you.
I totally agree with you. And there is not a CTA right now, essentially, on the website. The website was spun up relatively quickly just to support the LVP, to be honest with you. It wasn't meant to be like our main website that everyone's going to and learning all about, everything there. But we have another one. Panyu has designed a really, really good look at what I think is a really well designed and conceptualized new website. I believe it's in production now. If it's not in production, it will be in production. It shouldn't take long to make, at which point those things you're talking about will be handled. We got some comments from our biz dev team yesterday that we need to have a better section on the new website for people to, propose themselves to work with us, for example. So we need to have a whole section where they like, oh, how do you work with Glue? We'd like to pitch our product to Glue. We'd like support from Glue's devs, whatever, like a whole section about that, which we hadn't thought about in the concepts, but now they'll be implemented as well. And so each individual type of user should be accounted for in a new site. But of course, if we come out with that site, Hannah, and anyone else, if we come out with a website and you say, hey, look, there's a whole subsection of people here that you're not really thinking about or you're forgetting about, please just tell us. We're not infallible at all. And we don't want to make the very best thing we possibly can. So if you do see something like that and you think we're dropping the ball somewhere, let us know.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you very much.
And I think the point of we're moving in phases is definitely really critical, right? Like the website as it is was the LVP phase. We are in the process of updating it. And again, like there's like a whole release cadence that's kind of all coming together now. And it kind of looks like we haven't really done much because what we've been doing is getting all the release cadence ready to go. That way we can go really hard and really quick and really make everything maximally effective. But so there's loads of updates coming along the way. So there's tons of stuff. So the next phase is going to start soon here, and it's going to be pretty exciting.
I think I actually want to speak as well. Go ahead. Thanks.
Hey, I appreciate you guys having me. Well, that's actually a really big deal. Most people don't actually understand how advertising works. They're usually just in, their golden thrones going, you should make people find us. Actually having the understanding of how, ad marketing actually, functions is a huge, huge deal. Only thing that I would disagree with you on is that you said that buying data is almost wasting money. I like to look at it as investing into exploring different ad markets as far as like what works, right? But other than that, man, you are on point as far as that goes. Kind of excited to see what else comes of it, just because, when you have people who know what they're doing, actually, put the foot to the metal and make it happen, it's always an exciting time. But runtime upgrades, that was the thing that I was coming up here for. Something that I think a lot of people don't understand with runtime upgrades is the fact that there's way more transparency when it comes to the setup and substrates. Just because when you are voting, at first you get to vote for the actual thing that's about to take place, but secondly, those upgrades, they're legible. You can actually go in there and see what your vote is going to do, like the exact impact of that vote is written out on the blockchain for people to see. It's not like it's pie in the sky. Yeah, we're gonna want to do this thing, and somebody else is gonna code it out and like figure it out. No, like things are ready. There's 100% transparency as far as what's going to be implemented, and you don't have to guess if people are going to do it right, if they're going to do it wrong. What you see is what you get, and you get to move forward with it. Like to me, that is the epitome of what a blockchain should be like and how it should function. That transparency is everything.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I think runtime upgrades are hard to really explain well, and I obviously didn't do a particularly good job. But once you really dig in, and if you really look at how do these upgrades work and how operationally crucial are they, um, it's hard to market this just because it is a pretty complex topic. But yeah, they are going to be excellent. I really think it'll be an absolutely massive change with how fast we can move, right? How fast can we do things? How like we don't have to go convince validators to upgrade, right? No, you do a proposal. If it passes, it gets upgraded, right? There's no doubts. There's no like background machinations about like, oh, well, is this person going to want to do it or is that person going to want to do it? Do we have to worry about Tether not supporting it, right? Like all that falls away. It becomes completely transparent. I am super psyched about them. I think they're going to be I think they're going to be underappreciated, and that's actually totally fine because most people don't need to know about it, right? And it'll be really smooth and it'll be kind of abstracted away. So I think they'll be extremely valuable to operate and to give the users a lot of control. Yet most people will not want to know about them because it's kind of like, oh, how does Amazon's upgrade process work? It's like, well, I have absolutely no idea, but I love Amazon, right? So I think for most people, it'll probably end up being that. But from the background perspective, they will be extremely crucial for really having a properly decentralized network, right? There's no like who gets to do code, right? There's no like foundation, nothing like that decides, right? It's just no, like you just vote.
Yeah, and there's never going to be a glue classic out there like Ethereum.
Correct. Yeah, just technically impossible.
Hey, Action CEO, just really quickly, because something you said made me think about this. So you mentioned that you disagree about about it wasting money. The unfortunate thing is with these spaces, we don't have a video, right? And so when I said wasting money, I put like in my own reality out here in the world, I put air quotes out there because people call it wasting money. So I totally agree with you. It's just it's a good thing.
I have one question here from Karen. He happened to be here as well. Karen sent this question through X. So I'm going to ask this question here. Liquidity can be a complex topic in the world of crypto. Could you explain how providing liquidity will work for Glue?
Yeah, totally. So, okay, so there is going to be two distinct audiences, I would say, on Glue, right? There's more of the day-to-day retail user, right? What I would say, like more of the, I guess, like a Robinhood trader, right? Somebody who like they want to buy, they want to sell, but that's pretty much the extent of their knowledge and the level of complexity that they want to dive into. We are not going to try to push them to provide liquidity, right? I think providing liquidity, both from a UX side, is complex, but just like, I mean, impermanent loss, like just truly understanding is hard, right? It's not something that most people will understand. It's not something that most people will actually end up making money on if they try. And so it's not going to be a huge focus on pushing them towards providing liquidity. So on the Glue Hub front end, there will be a section to provide liquidity, but it will be more of like we have a whole bunch of cool functionality as to like how do you like some sections can be hidden and people can unhide them, right? So no one's forced to do anything. There's more the simple interface, which is more of a hey, this is the interface the vast majority of people should use, and then we will have an advanced section where you can provide liquidity. And so we will have concentrated liquidity, so it'll be more of a Unity 3 style. And so it's even more complex, right? I mean, I think figuring out impermanent loss, but then just like with how does the NFT work, all that stuff, right? So we're not going to be focusing around pushing retail to that. I think it's a bad idea. We will very much focus around having both market makers as well as more like the larger whales providing liquidity. I think it's a much more, I don't know, reasonable approach, I guess. And then also we will have incentives for liquidity, right? So I think that's how we will attract a good bit of it. But so yeah, I think that answered the question, didn't it?
Well, I think really quickly add on to that. So that answers the liquidity as relates to like a decentralized exchange, but there's also liquidity, for example, in like a lending and borrowing platform, right? So people can deposit their Glue USD or their ETH or whatever into that, and maybe you could talk to the folks about whether we're going to have that kind of opportunity.
Yes, totally. Okay, fair point. Sorry, I was just talking about traditional like liquidity. So yes, there will be a stable coin. Getting the stable coin to be very liquid will be a huge focus. So there'll be incentives around that. You will be able to deposit into a lending protocol, also a big focus, right? I think a lot of retail users will want to deposit into a lending protocol. I think getting retail users to then mint a stable against it is still on the, I think, possible side, but probably approaching the too complex. So I think there is going to be some audience for it, but probably less. I think depositing into lending is going to be big for everyone, right? Because it's easy. You can't really screw it up. There's no real parameterization, right? As long as it's pretty simple. I think borrowing from lending protocol will fall more under the advanced user side. So the front end that is meant for retail will not really have it'll have the ability to borrow, right? But it's not going to be highlighted in any way. Just because, again, I think trying to get retail to use more leverage is probably not a responsible thing to do. And so that's not going to be a focus of ours. And then, yeah, I think we have a whole bunch of different ways. So here's one of the really nice things where we have a massive advantage, right? It's a whole ecosystem. So there will be a token for the DEX, right? There's the L1, obviously, right? And so we have a lot more flexibility to pay incentives than certainly any DeFi protocol, right? Because any DeFi protocol really only has their own token, where we also can add incentives with the layer 1 token. We also have an advantage compared to any layer 1 that doesn't have kind of a native DeFi ecosystem, because they only have the layer 1 token. And so I think between that, we can build a really attractive incentive program that will attract a lot of liquidity. And from the liquidity side, I want to attract a reasonable amount of liquidity, right? Like I think there's obviously a lot of stuff where like, oh, we have 400 million in TVL. It's like, well, that's kind of neat, right? But like, how many people actually do $100 million trades on your protocol, right? Because otherwise, there's really not that much of a point of having 400 million of TVL. So I think what we want to do is we want to identify which tokens have large trading volume. What is the average trade size, right? If people make an average $1,000 trades, getting to a 0.5% slippage isn't going to be super difficult, right? You don't need $1 zillion to get that done, right? So I believe a lot more in targeted and smart incentives, I guess, to attract what I would consider the quote unquote right amount of liquidity. And I'm sure we can argue what the right amount of liquidity is, right? But it probably isn't $600 million on an asset that no one really trades, right? And so I think there's going to be more of a, how do we take a reasonable approach? I think TVL is important because it will drive token valuations, but I don't want to really get sucked into the TVL for the sake of TVL only game, right? So I think I want to be much more pragmatic. Like I would rather widen how many tokens have a good amount of TVL, right? That type of stuff. So, but yeah, we have what I think is going to be a pretty solid strategy around that. I think it's going to be absolutely crucial, right? So I really want to, from early on in the game of the ecosystem, like early as in pretty close to day one, have a lot of liquidity across a lot of different pairs, right? Because people will want to trade and people will need to be able to do so without having really terrible fee issues, right? Or not fee, I guess, slippage issues versus fee. But yeah, I think it's going to be a major focus of ours.
Hello, Snapshot. Can I ask a question in regards to that?
Sure.
Thank you very much. I have two questions regarding the ecosystem native stablecoin. The first one is, what's the name going to be? Very important, of course. And the second one is, if I remember correctly from the secret sale on the layer 1 GG site, it says that the stablecoin will be used to attract TVL. and that it's backed by crypto and real world assets, the RWA. Can you maybe share something more about that?
Yeah, totally. So the name will probably near certainly simply be USDG. I really want to switch to a system, and this is totally off topic, but where the first three letter tell you what it is, and then there's an appendix afterwards versus all the various naming conventions that everyone's following. Yes, it will be. So how it works is you can deposit an asset. So for example, you can take, we will probably in the beginning not allow collateralization with glue because we very much want to avoid a Terra-like pyramid scheme issue. So at some point we might have a small percentage of collateral that can be provided in glue, but that's not going to be the case to beginning. For example, let's say you have ETH, you can contribute ETH into the lending protocol, which means there's now borrowing availability, which in turn generates yield that goes back to the depositor. And so against that collateral, you can then mint the stable. It'll be crypto asset backed, it'll be over collateralized. And also what we're looking at, we've talked to a couple different partners on this. When we're talking about RWAs, I think the probably most interesting one in the short run, and there's several providers of this now, is more of like a tokenized US Treasury bill type thing, right? I think that's the RWA that's gotten, I would say, the most traction so far, which totally makes sense since that's by far one of the biggest asset classes in the world, which is effectively what USDC is doing, right? But USDC is simply absorbing all the yields and just keeping it. And so how it would work in this case is you would buy an on-chain RWA US Treasury bill asset. You would get the yield from that. You would deposit it into the lending protocol and then mint the stable against it. And because the collateral, aka the RWA Treasury, would continue to increase in value, it would effectively start paying off the loan, which is this minted stablecoin that you minted against the asset. So as the value increases, your health factor will increase, and it effectively is paying itself off, right? So you will be able to get yield and keep the yield from the underlying asset. This also works, for example, with a staked ETH type situation, where you can deposit and then mint against that. I'm not sure if that answered the question.
And as you could expect, we're talking to and have talked to the, some of the leaders in the space for RWA related stuff for this. So, assuming we choose to work with one of those that are noteworthy, we'll let you guys know.
Yeah, and all of that's gonna be more of a rolled out thing, right? Not everything is gonna be available from day one. But I mean, I'm personally a strong believer in the RWAs, right? I think it's kind of ironic where, like, I think there's some people in the space really prefer a purely crypto-backed stable, and I philosophically agree. But then, practically speaking, USDT and USDC are by far the largest, right? So I think having the extra yield gives you marketing budget to actually be able to get adoption for your stable, as we've seen, right? I mean, they're just massive. And so I think that mix of having crypto assets. Now, the nice thing is if somebody, for example, if the asset drops or something, it will automatically get liquidated, right? So there's very low risk of the stable then being under collateralized. As I was saying, I don't want to, glue will have to get to a pretty stable price before we would consider using it as collateral, and if so, at a very conservative health factor, right? We, again, very much want to avoid the Luna death spiral issue. So it's not a...
Well, we also want to avoid like exploits. Which is one of the biggest ways that people do. I mean, this is what Avi Eisenberg was in trouble for, was manipulating the price of a lended asset to be able to borrow stuff, and then they bankrupted the mango markets, and there's been so many of these sorts of things that I've personally been involved with the recovery on, that I think we whenever a snapshot says we'll be very conservative with the collateralization of a more volatile token, for example, glue, I mean, we mean really conservative. Like you're not going to get 70% or 50%, you're going to get 10% for something like that. Maybe USD against USD, you're getting a better rate, but you're definitely not going to get it on something that's more prone to manipulation.
Yeah, totally agreed. I think the stable really foundational, right? I think if the stable gets as much adoption as I think we can make it get, it will make the ecosystem extremely sticky, right? I think if there's a branding component behind the stable where people say, hey, can you pay me in USDG instead of Tether, right? That's where I want to get it. And I think in order to get there, it needs to have both a decent yield. I don't think now crypto people expect 30% yields in stable coins, right? But no one outside of crypto does. And so I think if we have a solid savings product where people can say, hey, I'm holding this, right? And so one of the options will be to then stake your stable as well, right? So there's going to be a whole bunch of ways for more retail oriented and to see it more as a savings account versus I want to get yield on a stable, right? It's more like, hey, look, I have this money, I want to deposit it and get some yield. So I think it's going to be more oriented towards that user versus a hardcore like crypto degen. I want to whatever loop it 12 times and get like massive leverage, right? That's less the goal. People can build product like that around it. I think people will build it. I think it'll be really cool, but that's not going to be like a major like selling point to retail users, just because that doesn't seem like where we'd want to go with it. Oh, I think KNG.
KNG, your hands up.
Yeah. So I think Ogle kind of like already touched on the subject though. So one of the things I have noticed with a lot of these lending protocols and stable coins is that they don't really hire traditional risk people, and they don't really publish like their traditional risk like documentation. So you end up with like people that just have a traditional background in finance and just end up taking advantage of the situation. So like my suggestion is like, I know you guys are probably far away from that, but maybe hire some of these traditional bankers and like actually share the boring documentation.
Some really boring people is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. I think I just messaged.
No, I think it's a good idea though,
that.
KNG.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, everybody says like a
but we do have a lot of
but,
connections in that space.
Yeah.
No, but I think you're right though. I mean, whenever we come out with these sorts of things, I mean, you know, I've had a lot of talks and emails and meetings and dinners and so forth, and Snapshot has too, with a lot of traditional finance people as we've been building Glue, and they are, you know, they love it. Like the guys in TradFi who are on Wall Street or elsewhere, and they also know a little bit about crypto, crush it. So many, you'd be surprised how many of the top crypto influencers are former like TradFi people. Like they don't talk about it, you know, until you really get to know them. But a lot of them are former TradFi guys, right? You even look at someone like SBF, you know, Jane Street, right? Like so many people, they look at a place like crypto and they say, oh man, I could really take advantage of this. And you're exactly right. You know, like that's because of the relative, you know, it's the relative nascence, it's the relative sort of ignorance of most of the crowd. And they go and look and they see an inefficient market and they take advantage of it. And, you know, that's fine. You know, that's how your market gets efficient, is by people who take advantage of an inefficient market and make it efficient. But yeah, to the extent that we might expose ourselves or our users to problems, you know, from that, then we do need to have some people looking at it. And we have a number of people we could get to do risk modeling for this. KNG, if you're interested in that kind of thing, then, you know, you're also welcome to kind of, you know, watch in on how that works and stuff, if you're interested from like an academic point of view on how that works. And then I imagine we'll have a, you know, some kind of small internal report made that shows us what our vulnerabilities, almost like an audit report, but for the financial side.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's really critical, specifically with risk management for the stable, right? I think part of the problem there is the stable coin issuers, not us, but the other ones, right? Their incentives are generally totally misaligned, right? Like their incentive is to get maximal adoption for their stable, and their incentive is to get as much yield into their personal pocket as possible, right? And both of those things generally lead to decisions that are much, much higher risk than you probably would want them to be. I think for us, the major advantage here is because it's a whole ecosystem, right? Realistically, where we will make money is from the glue token going way up. For us to take an absurd risk gamble on the stable coin to get some extra yield out of it would be extremely stupid, right? And so I think because it is a whole ecosystem approach, there is like we will make money lows if the whole ecosystem works. And if the stable implodes, it will really screw us, right? Like it'll be very bad. So we're going to be strongly incentivized to keep the stable and the other like safe things very, very safe. Because I think for us, the huge exponential upside is on the glue token, not on the extra 2% yield we can squeeze out of the stable by suddenly going into whatever Chinese treasuries instead of US treasuries, right? So I think that's going to be by default, because of how the setup is, our incentives are way better aligned, both Ogle and I, but also as a community at large. Because even if you look at DAI, right? DAI holders, they care about stability in the sense that it would be bad if it went down. But if you ask the DAI DAO, yeah, that's kind of confusing. Should we make extra risk because your token price will triple, right? You're going to have a fair chance that they're going to say yes. And so very suboptimal from an incentive structure. And I think being an ecosystem, I think we will have less of that challenge. And again, I mean, that's just what we're going to be managing towards, or at least proposing it. A lot of this will be vote based. So it's not just going to be us making decisions, but I think we can have at least some influence on it. And I think we'll definitely go on the very conservative route there.
And so Prakash was up here, and it looked like he had a question, but I think he may have popped off. He is an investor, so if he comes back on in the next few seconds, I guess we can get him. But otherwise, Snapshot, you want to call it a meeting?
I think so.
Call it over?
I was a fun one. We got to a lot of marketing related stuff, which I know we haven't talked as much about before.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Maybe Val, if you want to ask Prakash, I know he's in the glue room. If he has a question that he wants to ask us, we can put it on next week's AMA.
Excellent. We'll do that. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome.
All right. Take care, folks.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night or day or wherever you are.